I'm also on the Washington State PTA Advocacy Committee, and have been for a couple of years, where we work to basically implement the platform that our members have voted in during Legislative Assembly and convention. That's it.
Thank you, Natalia. I'm going to go to Jill Geary next. Jill?
Hi, my name is Jill Geary. I am a middle-aged, I guess, white woman, she, her pronouns. I am the advocacy chair for Roosevelt High School. That's how I appear for this particular meeting. That's how I'm appearing.
Thank you, Jill. And then, of course, Liza Rankin, our school board vice president. I'll let you tell the people about the rest of your things.
Hello. Yeah, my name is Liza Rankin. I am took oath of office last week for my second term, reelected to Seattle School Board. I'm the current vice president and legislative liaison for the board. At tomorrow's board meeting, we will be electing president and vice president for 2024. That's an internal, or I mean, a within board vote, but it happens in a public meeting. And then the new president appoints the various liaison positions. Prior to being on the school board, elected in 2019, I served as the advocacy legislative chair for Seattle Council PTSA, for my kids' school PTA. And I also have 2 kids in Seattle Public Schools, one in middle school, one in high school.
Thank you. And so today, I just want to say welcome to everybody. We've had some more folks join. The meeting today is for our advocacy chairs, and a lot of this is going to be focused on answering questions, getting the support to you that you need, giving folks a little bit of an opportunity to get prepared. Legislative session is going to be starting on, I believe, January 8th. It'll be the second week in January. It's going to be a short session, 60 days. It's going to feel both intense and quick. It'll be different than last session because last session was longer and was a budget session. That doesn't mean there won't be any discussion around money this time, but the amount of dollars on the table are typically less. Often in these short sessions, we're really not as focused on huge dollar items, just because those dollars aren't available without redoing the whole budget, and that's not manageable within 60 days. And so I think that's a little bit of the framing. I want to just, Natalia, Jill, Liza, do you want to jump in with any kind of overviews of things that you want folks to know?
Well, I am happy to share a resource document that I created because I know we have mostly legislative chairs here. This is a document that I recently updated for, well, I created it when I was the Region 6 legislative chair, and I just took it and updated it, and I'm going to pop it into the chat. But it basically has a lot of resources for where to find different things on the Washington State PTA website, and contact information for different people in Region 6. So I'll just go ahead and pop that into the chat, and people can feel free to share that with their communities or with whoever they want. It also has a number of upcoming events. One in particular I wanted to bring everyone's attention to is tomorrow evening. There's a panel discussion that's been put together by the Washington State PTA Advocacy Committee that has legislators, and the topic of the discussion is going to be the capital budget, specifically focused on school buildings. That's one of our big issues this coming session, is how to get more money to help fix and maintain school buildings. And in fact, before I post that document, let me go ahead and pop in a reminder for everybody of what our Washington State positions are during this legislative assembly. I need an extra pair of hands to talk. I can't talk and click at the same time. So here's the link to our advocacy page. So it has our top 5 issues. So I'll just remind everybody what the top 5 issues are. They're addressing the student mental health crisis, addressing critical gaps in education funding, preventing and reducing gun violence and suicide, addressing funding, inclusion, and supports in special education, and building and maintaining safer school facilities. So the panel discussion tomorrow will be mostly around building and maintaining safer school facilities. I also wanted to remind everyone that we have a focus day coming up on January 15th. And that is going to be a day when we all come together in Olympia and we meet with legislators. There are also several events planned by Washington State PTA. They're going to have some talks. They're going to have some tours of the Capitol building. You're really encouraged to bring your kids if you can. That's a no school day. It's Martin Luther King Day. And it's really just designed to communicate to legislators what our top 5 supported issues are, as well as our also supported issues. And so the idea is that you would come and you would have short meetings. Usually they're on the order of about 15 minutes with your legislators, and you would, in addition to telling them about our priorities, say something about your experience that speaks to what those priorities are talking about, because legislators like to make those kinds of personal connections. So I'm going to pop a bunch of stuff into the chat now while I am quiet. And also happy to take any questions about anything at any point. So we don't have to wait until people are finished speaking. This is a very open session.
I can talk a little bit while Natalia's popping things into the chat about the school board sort of parallel process that happens. So I did put in the chat the SPS legislative priorities for, oh, there it is, for the 2024 session. Much like PTA, we, gather information from our members and put together a platform of the highest priority asks for the session. So if you click on the little plus sign there, 2024 legislative priorities, it drops down to the larger pieces of that. And so these are the priorities that have been approved by the board. As the legislative liaison, I prepare with staff the sort of recommended priorities and bring it to the full board, and the full board discusses and in this case adopts the priorities. And what this does is it provides the direction to our district about where the focus for staff should be. So because the board is the governing body for the district, we need to give that direction and authorization to the superintendent and staff. So we have a lobbyist that works for our district and works with other districts too. And this gives the lobbyist the direction about what we want to see. And it doesn't come out of nowhere. It's not a list of like, it's not like a out of nowhere wish list. It's while I'm putting together the priorities, I talk with other board directors, I talk with community groups, stakeholders about what their priorities are, other groups that are going to be advocating on behalf of our students, what, you know, what they're seeing as top needs, top priorities. And then I also talk with legislators about what's likely to come forward. So we don't necessarily want to put in our priorities something that we know is not even going to be up for discussion. That being said, we do have some things that we will always ask for, closing the gap between what districts spend and what the state provides is always going to be on there, even though, as Sam said, this is not a budget year. So based on speaking with other folks, the capital one is a big one for the state. We also talked to OSPI, who's the state superintendent office, about what priorities they might be bringing forward, because they are working very, very directly and often with legislators from all over the state as well. So we and they will write and bring forward bills with the sponsorship of a legislator. And so we try to balance, or I try to balance what the top sort of, not emotional, but the things that people are saying are the most important with what's likely to move forward. And then of course, the most important thing is what's going to make an impact for our students. So in a non-budget year, we tend to see bills that didn't quite make it through last session come back. That's usually a place to start. So depending on the different committee chairs, some committee chairs at the legislative level don't want to hear new bills. There are, of course, a ton of new bills that drop all the time, but the tendency is to, in the second year of the biennium, which is this is what we're going into right now, is to look at what sort of almost crossed the finish line. It didn't maybe quite make it through to the governor's desk in the budget year that we could bring back. And then what are some financial things that don't require all new addressing of the budget? So like the capital is a really good example. There is a priority that we have there for capital funding that is able to be addressed in rules. So OSPI actually has the authority to write a rules change that isn't a new piece of legislation or new piece of new budget expenditure for the state. It's a change to the rules that OSPI is allowed to make that would bring in line, how can I explain this in the most straightforward way? Basically, there's a set level of assumption that the state uses for capital costs, and will provide matching funds to districts based on that. It's per square foot. Is they say, okay, school construction is this much per square foot. So if you raise this much in a local levy, the state will provide matching funds. Right now, their formula for the price per square foot is way lower than with inflation and the cost of materials right now, what it actually is. So there's a proposal for a change in rules to bring that cost per square foot allowance up and allow districts to receive more money in matching. So that's a good example, I think, of something that has the potential for high impact on districts' financial situations that's not going to alter the state's budget that they've written for the last for this 2 years. I know that's a ton of information, so please stop me if you have any questions. But that's the kind of thing we tend to focus on in the off years, is where can we maximize student and district benefit that doesn't require a whole new thing that they just looked at last year. The other, I would say, big kind of conflict that we're looking at this year is that because we were really successful in collective advocacy among school boards, education associations, families, advocacy organizations like PTA, because we were really successful in getting a large increase in the multiplier, the funding for special education, there is a sense among legislators that, well, we did education last session and now we have other things to focus on. So we've got that kind of tension going. I know there's a big appetite for addressing mental health issues and housing issues, which of course impact our students, but are not specifically K-12 issues. So we kind of have to walk that balance of, obviously we don't want to pit like mental health against education. They're both really important. And they both do impact students, but there will be some sense of some legislators feeling like they just did K-12 and now they don't need to focus on it as much. The other thing that's going on at the state level is with the governor's seat up for election. Folks who want to run for statewide seats are all kind of moving around. So some legislators that are eyeing other state level elected positions, people's attention is all over the place. So we're trying to be strategic, trying to really, my priority going into the session is to really speak in alignment with other school districts, to make sure that we don't split the focus and that we're maximizing the session for our students as much as possible in a really kind of, I don't know, murky dynamic environment, especially given them it's a short session. Clear as mud, I hope. I don't know if that made any sense. But yeah, feel free to ask any questions that you may have.
This is Sam. I'm getting some questions in the chat that are just coming directly to me about how legislative priorities are developed and what kinds of coordination and things like that. So I wanted to clarify a few things. One is that districts can't direct parent advocacy, and school board can't direct parent advocacy. That doesn't mean we can't share information. So typically it's best if parents ask questions so it's clear that it's an informed situation. But school board directors and staff can inform about what the voted on legislative priorities for our district are, right? Those are things that they can share out, but like Director Rankin can't come into this space, and she hasn't, right? She can't come into this space and say, this is what you should advocate for. But what she can say is, this is the advocacy work that I'm doing. So there's,
I can't say you should tell your legislator to vote for X bill. I can't and won't ever say that. Neither will anybody from the district. And there's a little bit of a description to that page I dropped in the chat about government relations, describes that a little more. But it is a funny line. So that's what is really, you know, like Sam said, I can provide information. Here are our top priorities. Here's what staff will be advocating for. Here's what we will be signing in on. And there's always, it's a little bit broad too, because we don't know exactly what bills will make it forward. And we want to give ourselves enough room to be able to support a bill that meets the needs of our students and our community. That if we get too specific in the priorities, we may limit ourselves from not being able to advocate for something that would be really beneficial. But in terms of developing the priorities, I could probably, when I stop talking, I could try to find it. When I brought forward the positions for approval to the full board, I talked about the process, and there's some information in the meeting materials too. And I also talked about it kind of as it goes on. I give a legislative liaison update and I talk about where we are in the process.
I also got a question around Washington State PTA and how state PTA develops our priorities. And so our priorities come from our members. And we have a process where people put forward proposals, and then they're brought forward into legislative assembly. We're sharing out information. We share out information. There's tons of information on state PTA's website. And then our members who are voting delegates at legislative assembly, which happens annually, vote to create our priorities. We do this kind of 2-year system. So we have our issues and we set our top 5. So our priorities come from our members. And we are, there was some question about like, how do we partner with other groups? And so there's a lot of overlap between what we do, what we're advocating for, and what a range of other entities, whether they're WASDA, the Washington State School Directors Association, whether they're individual school boards, whether they're WEA, the Washington Education Association, whether it's the League of Education Voters, whether it's even orgs that don't have education in their title that aren't in schools, League of Women Voters, for example, NAACP. There's a number of things where we form coalitions or informal coalitions, or we communicate back and forth. In some ways, there are orgs that we can coordinate with, and then there's others where we can only kind of inform, but we try to stay aware of what people's positions are as they pull them forward to really discuss these kinds of things. And it's good to know not only who your allies are and who agrees with you on things, but also where your opposition might be, and where there might be maybe 2 different organizations are both saying we agree that we want more of X, but there might be differences in the details. And then that gets worked out. And we come and we bring testimony, and sometimes historically, as council, we've supported advocates from outside of Seattle, and from outside of the school system who are advocating for things that really do align with our priorities. So that's how some of that works. And I know like we've just done a whole lot of talking about legislative issues, but I also just want to say that as advocacy chairs, your charge is not solely legislative advocacy. Some advocacy that happens is really building level advocacy. Sometimes it's talking about things that, well, any issues that come up in your building. So you might be talking to a principal about something. You might be supporting a parent who's talking to a teacher about something. So these are all, you might be advocating to the school board about something you want the school board to change. All of these different levels. You might be testifying at city council. You might be, there's all different spaces. Your charge is to support advocacy. It is also, and I want to be really clear about this, it's not your job to do all the advocacy for your school by yourself. It's your job to, it is the mission of PTA to advocate for every child. So you're supposed to support people in their advocacy, both by getting them information and maybe if they have an advocacy question saying, okay, that's not a school board thing. That's a legislator thing, or that's not a legislator thing. That's actually a principal thing. So that people tell their story, do their advocacy at the level and space where it's most likely to be effective, because it is extremely rare for any politician to tell you that they don't want to hear from you. but they might not be the one who's best able to help you. So it might be a school issue, but not a school board issue. So it might be a teacher issue. It might be a principal issue, things like that. So just knowing that, all of that. And I want to make sure that you're all aware that as advocacy chairs or legislative chairs, different PTAs call them different, you do have a handbook that Washington State PTA provides. And you may look at it and say, this is really big. I don't want to sit down and read this whole thing. That's fine. It has a table of contents. If you have a question, go there, take a look. There's a lot of tools. There's also some handouts that state provides, like build your pitch and things like that, that help you to make your advocacy more effective. And so use those tools. And then we've got a range of ways that we can support. And I also encourage you to make sure that as you're saying that you're advocating on behalf of your PTA, make sure that you're really advocating on behalf of your entire PTA. So your job is also to listen to your full community, to make sure that you're hearing from all the opposing views that exist within your school communities, and that you truly are representing your full community moving forward. So, so those are some of those things that are really critical.
That can also, what Sam just mentioned, that can also be, some PTAs do that officially. So for SPS, by the board adopting our legislative priorities, I have the authority to say, I'm here on behalf of Seattle Public Schools and the board. And then WASDA is the Washington State School Director Association that represents all 295 school districts across the state. So I'm also on the board of WASDA, but because we have adopted our priorities as a member represented body, if I am advocating for something that's a WASDA position, I can say on behalf of WASDA, I'm speaking now on a position that's been supported by the membership and as our official position as an organization. Sometimes individual PTAs will adopt their own legislative platform. I haven't seen that happen that much. People typically tend to use the Washington State platform, but if there's something that you want to be able to say that you're speaking with the voice of your PTA as opposed to a PTA member, sometimes advocacy chairs will have, it's kind of late to do that now, but will have brought forward a platform proposal to your PTA. And then you can say without a doubt, I'm speaking on behalf of my PTA. This is a member adopted position. So it's also really helpful to make sure that you're accurate. Use the voices, use the voice you know you have. And if it's you as an individual parent, that is totally fine. If it's you as an individual parent and it's something aligned with the Washington State priorities, you can say, as a parent in Seattle at X school and as a member of the Washington State PTA, I'm asking you to support blah, blah, blah. But if it's not on a platform, doesn't mean you can't advocate for it. It just means that you can't represent yourself represent your personal position as being that of a larger body if it's not. I hope that makes sense.
I see a hand. David, when you come on, will you just say who you are and then go ahead and ask your question or statement?
Absolutely. My name is David LeBreton. I'm the advocacy co-chair at Genesee Hill Elementary in West Seattle, and excited to be on this call. Thank you for putting it together. You said something earlier that struck a chord, and something that we've been talking about internally, and I've actually spoken to Vivian from SCPTSA on, is you alluded to decisions are made at different levels of government and by different entities. One of the things that our community has asked for is a cheat sheet, and it doesn't have to be to the policy expert level of precision, but at a high level to help our members understand, for that student in that classroom, who determined their curriculum, who is paying for the building, who's paying for the teachers, how, I think we're calling it an influence map, but it's really just a very high level cheat sheet. And we're wondering if there's anything that exists currently to that effect that we can share with our PTA members.
David, did you send an email to me that I owe you a response on? Is that you? Okay.
That's me.
I did get it. I gotta weed through some of the, going first term and second term, but I haven't forgotten. In terms of a cheat sheet, I'm sort of a walking cheat sheet, but there are so many different educational entities in Washington State, like so many. It's kind of, makes me think, like, do we need all these? Are these actually, like, what's the impact? What's the actual impact on student outcomes that each of these entities has? And can we even measure and determine it? But something that we're working on at the SPS level is trying to have we're trying to start to build that into like our website even. So if you go to Let's Talk, you should hopefully be routed. If you have a question, you should hopefully be routed to the right person. I would love for us to have a posted flow chart with names. That takes a lot more administrative stuff because people change positions all the time. But basically, if you're talking about your first resource is probably going to be your teacher. Like most of the time, the hope, right, is that you're able to send your child to school and know that they have what they need, and not have to know about all the different entities. But basically, your first stop would be your teacher, and then your principal, and then if that's not resolved, then the question is really, is this an issue of implementation, or is this an issue of policy or viewpoint? If it's an issue of like viewpoint, priority, some kind of values prioritization, that would be a school board or government, because we do have, I don't know if you're really asking for this right now, but basically at the state and federal level, there are a whole bunch of laws that describe what we're expected to do as public school entities to provide in terms of education. So there is a lot of stuff that's already like, oh, that's just state law, that's federal law, it has to happen. Within that, we get to make decisions at the school board level for our local communities' priorities, as to like how those state laws are carried out, and ensuring, like we have a focus right now on African American males that's not stated anywhere else but at the school district level, because we're looking at our own data, we see that there's a big gap there, and that those students need more support. So the school board is responsible for representing the vision and values of our local community. And we do that by adopting curriculum, by writing policy, and by hiring and evaluating the superintendent, and by approving a budget primarily. So adopting curriculum doesn't mean we can adopt whatever we feel like. It has to meet state guidelines. So I had many conversations this fall with some school board directors from some smaller districts who were advocating for local control. And I had to say, what do you mean by that? Well, we want to adopt curriculum and we want to have control over our budget and programs. I'm like, cool, already have it. You adopt your curriculum. You don't get to adopt whatever curriculum you want. Like, it's state law that we provide age appropriate sexual health education K through 12. So you can't local control opt your way out of that. That's state law. You can have your choice of a number of curriculums and even create your own in district if you want, as long as it meets state standards. You can't, local control doesn't mean that you don't have to follow state law. So yes, I had to explain that to people. And the same with the budget and programs. I'm like, well, you hire and evaluate your superintendent. So you should be giving your superintendent direction that aligns with your values, as long as it doesn't violate state law. So there was a school board director, several school board directors in the Tri-Cities areas that were recalled because they defied the state masking order. They locally adopted mask optional when the state health department and the governor had directed a mask mandate. A school board can't take it upon themselves to make a different decision like that. So, yeah. And then in terms of the programs, well, you approve your budget. So, and then I also had to say, I don't think you mean you want local control over your budget, because does that mean you don't want state money? Because they will take you up on that. So don't let's not say that. And they say, oh, no, we just want to decide what it gets spent on. So, okay, literally that's like your number one job is to approve a balanced budget every year. That's how you do that. So there's all kinds of different ways that these things all intersect and layer over each other. I think the time where people get the most confused is about, is it about policy and governance and direction, or is it about implementation? And if it's about implementation, it's going to be 100% the superintendent or below in the organization. If it's about what is the content or what is the requirement, that's coming from the governance levels. That's just a quick, we could talk about this forever, but
so can I just pop in for a second? I just wanted to share my screen and highlight a couple of places that it's not really the cheat sheet per se that you're asking for, but I have something I can share with you. Just a second. That's on the website, on the PTSA. Oops, sorry, that's not right. So if you go to this part of the PTSA website, Advocacy and Legislative Resources, and you scroll to the bottom, you'll see two useful tabs. So one is Citizens Guides to Washington State, which has a guide to K-12 finance, a guide to the state's tax structure, and a guide to the operating and the capital budgets. These are all generated by the state, not by Washington State PTA, but by the state. I believe it's the governor's office, or maybe it's part of the legislative offices, but they generate these guides. And then the other really useful drop-down item here is acronyms and education. And if you click on that, it literally takes you to an alphabetized list of a whole bunch of acronyms in education. So this could be really useful when you're in a meeting and people are spouting off a bunch of acronyms and you have no idea what they're talking about. Then that can be really useful. Also, a while back, actually, Liza shared this document about serving on your local school board, and I'll pop this into the chat as well. But it talks a lot about school district governance and the requirements of the school boards. Again, this isn't really the cheat sheet you're asking for, but these are some resources that you can take a look at. And I believe that the district is planning to create kind of a, let me stop sharing, to create a, okay, I think it stopped sharing, to create a document of like an organizational structure of the district. But that might not, I don't think that's going to happen this year. I think maybe next year. So.
And Natalia, we got a question in the chat. Just saying, to clarify, when you're talking about state, were you talking about Washington State PTA versus other state?
Yeah, I should really be more careful how I talk about that when I talk about it. So the citizens guides that I was pointing to were not created by Washington State PTA. They were created by the state of Washington. Either the governor's office or the legislature. I can't remember who has committees that creates those kinds of guides. And when but the website I was referring to comes from Washington State PTA. It just has links to those outside guides. Thank you
And
for
so,
that.
sure. And I wanted to speak to David's, because I'm wondering if he might be feeling a little bit like, I'm really asking you for a cheat sheet, and you've given me a ton of information, none of which has been a cheat sheet. And I hear you.
I just
And
put a cheat sheet in for information that he didn't ask for at all.
good job, Liza.
Thanks.
So we're giving you a ton of things. One of the things is there are so many different issues that pop up from our members that it can be hard to develop one cheat sheet. At the same time, I do think that it would be really useful to collectively work on having what you're asking for. I think it would make the lives of our advocacy chairs much easier if at least the most common things and an explanation of what the different entities were was put forward. I both want to say, of course, that's something that we should be doing, and also acknowledge that I resigned as state PTA advocacy director, and I am not, I'm immediate past president on council, which puts me in a mentor role. So I don't want to voluntold people for things. So what I would like to do is bring your request to council and see if somebody will pick it up and run with it. Because I think what you're asking for is really, it's a great request, and it would be incredibly useful. I'm just hesitating here about committing somebody else to do work.
I just put something in that I totally forgot about that I found, and it's been a tab open on my laptop because I'm like, oh my gosh, more people should have this. It's from the state ombuds office. So the first thing that I dropped in, and I see Amy's got a hand up, but the first thing that I dropped in is about all the different oversight of education entities that are a ton, but there's a quick description there of what the entity is and what their role is. That's not as useful for an advocate typically. It's good for some context about all the different places that do have oversight of education activities, but you're probably not going to interact with a lot of the agencies in that first link that I put in. The most recent thing that I put in is from the state, the ombuds office. And it's just a really quick, how does the school district work? Kind of breaks down into how school district leadership is organized, some school board basics, other staff, and some very big buckets of school district finance. So that's actually a really good place to start.
And then I see Amy's hand.
Hello, I am Amy Moses Lagos, she, her pronouns. Thornton Creek Elementary Legislative Chair. A parent came to me with a question. Well, I've been organizing meetings with our legislators, and a parent brought me her issue, and I actually don't know how to address her issue. So I thought I would ask this group because you might know. Thornton Creek is in Northeast Seattle, and she lives in downtown Seattle. She didn't feel like her local schools were going to be a good fit for her daughters. And so she worked really hard she had a friend support her in researching schools and applying to schools. And it sounds like there was just a lot of paperwork, and it was a very difficult process. And, she was at the mercy of a lottery system. And so she did end up, her daughters do go to Thornton Creek. It's going well, but she's just saying that She was just frustrated with the process and she's worried about other parents. So I was trying to think about what she was saying, and I was wondering if maybe it's an equity issue that some parents in some neighborhoods have, like, because I live in Northeast Seattle, my kid has a disability. Like, I just checked a box to go to Thornton Creek. Like, it was very easy for me to send my kid to Thornton Creek. So anyway, she feels very strongly about this and she wants to advocate, and I'm not sure what to do with it. So would love to hear any thoughts that folks have.
That's very much implementation. Well, I guess, so having option schools is policy. That's no part of the state or anybody requires us to have option schools. So that would be a policy, but as far as the implementation of the process about the application, that's probably the open enrollment process that she's referring to, and that's very much implementation. So that would be well, so is she looking to advocate to make more school choices available, or to make the open enrollment process more straightforward?
Yeah, I think she would like to. I think my guess is she would say yes to both of those things.
Okay, so in terms of access to school choice, that especially given that we're looking at some significant boundary change shifts and potential school consolidations coming up, because we have over 4,000 fewer students than we had 5 years ago. I would say there's opportunity to be part of that conversation, because we're going to have to talk about it, right? And our values around it may be different than they were. I can actually say pretty confidently they are different than they were when the school choice was created. And so that would be a policy, definitely board level policy about what do we expect for our kids and who has access. That's within that's our purview, our choice as to whether or not to do that, or who, and then in terms of the actual open enrollment process, there could be some in policy. I would look at the procedure, and I can, once I stop talking, I can try to see if I can find it quickly. But the procedure, maybe needs to be updated, or maybe has something that wasn't followed. But that would be a place for her to look, and then she could wait for it to come up, pay attention to meetings and such, or she could use the Let's Talk feature, especially if it's about implementation. If she sends something about the open enrollment process to the school board, we're going to go, we don't do that, and we're going to send it to staff anyway. Yeah, does that give you enough?
Yes, thank you so much.
Okay. And I'll look really quick to see if I can find the procedure.
So this is Sam.
In student assignment, which is a huge procedure, but yeah.
So this is Sam, and I'm looking at the time. And before we wrap up today, I want to just make sure, as we're looking ahead to legislative session, that you're aware. You'll be able to testify remotely on bills when they hold public testimony. You might not want to, but you may have members who want to. So making sure that they know that they can do that. Once upon a time, we all had to drive to Olympia. That's no longer a requirement. I also want to make sure that families know that you can testify in your preferred language. Your members can testify in their preferred language, but it requires some support to get that set up. Historically, Council has provided support for members who would like to testify in a language other than English. One of the barriers that we have in the legislature is that while they will provide interpretation, a lot of the process of requesting that interpretation is in English. So, so Council has been supporting our members in being able to testify in their preferred language. You can also use the legislative hotline, and you can you can leave your message on there in your preferred language, and it will be interpreted for your legislators. You can also email in your preferred language. And I also want to take a moment to talk about other types of accommodations. And I know Jana's going to speak to that as well. But you can request accommodations when testifying at the legislature. And should you be planning to testify in person and you have a disability, be aware that you may need significant accommodations. For example, historically, if you wanted to testify and you were using a power wheelchair, an electric wheelchair, they would need to unbolt some chairs from the ground in some of the committee rooms to allow you to get to the space that you need to testify. And so that's something that you would need to let them know in advance. And so there are ways to request accommodations. You can also request accommodations around the amount of time that you have when testifying. And again, this is something that Council has historically supported our members in navigating and negotiating and figuring out. It is my understanding that this year in the legislature, they will be having ASL on TVW for everything, which is really great because they did not have that in the past. It used to be that you had to request it, so they didn't always have ASL, but they will be doing that this session. That is not having a live interpreter in the hearing room, though. So you should be able to, again, Council can support you and helping your members make those kinds of requests. Just know that this is something that is available, is not as easy as we would like it to be, and that we are happy to support you in getting the accommodations that you need in order to be able to participate. We've got 5 minutes left, and I know, Jana, you wanted to speak to accommodations, so I'm going to go ahead and call on you.
This is Jana Parker. I am wearing a black top. I have glasses and my hair is pulled back. I'm a white middle-aged woman. My hair is red brown. So I am I am now the co-president of the Seattle Special Education PTSA. I was a legislative advocacy chair for 2 years, but I'm still very active on the committee, and so you'll see me probably a bit. And we met with Representative Santos, and she is the chair of the Education Committee in the House of Representatives. And she actually, in the conversation of how inaccessible the process of legislature is, she actually brought up the issue of how we can make, or I brought up the issue, and she came with a solution that, a lot of people with disabilities, including students, are not able to participate in the legislative process. So her suggestion was, or her request to us was to specifically engage with students and encourage them, if they are unable to testify, as for, there could be anxiety, there could be some sort of other disability that impacts their ability to testify, that they could request accommodation to have a pre-recorded testimony, which is otherwise not acceptable as under the state law, but as an accommodation, she could make that happen. So she encouraged us to support families, support students, and I've reached out to the council, and I have spoken with June about this already. And I think in one of the general membership meetings, we would like to help to support families and encourage them to help students record and kind of, and help connect them with the committee and make sure that their voice is heard. So that's just one thing that was kind of new and exciting for us. Thanks.
Thank you, Jana. And again, we want to make sure that our members' voices, all of our members' voices, get the opportunity to be heard. And so supporting our members and getting their voice out there is really important. And so as you're kind of moving forward, think about who is making the decision about whatever issue it is. Think about your full community and how to hear from them and how to connect with them. And reach out to council if you have questions or you need help with something, because we're here to support. And we'll be doing more of these in the future. So let's make sure that you keep asking questions. I know that there's been interest in more questions, but we are running out of time, and I wanted to give our panelists a chance to jump in and wrap up. Liza, I saw your hand pop up for a moment there, so I'm going to go to you next.
Thank you. I just dropped 2 more links. One is an overview of legislative session from the Washington State Legislature website, and one is an article from Crosscut from a year or 2 ago that I found really helpful, just sort of providing a basic overview of how school funding in Washington works. Somebody in this meeting messaged me and reminded me that I gave a presentation at a PTA with a really helpful slide, and I remember that meeting, but I cannot for the life of me remember what that slide was. I will keep looking through my notes and see if I can find it. But also, when Sam was president, Sam hosted monthly meetings with legislative chairs and had me as a guest as the legislative liaison for the school board. If that would be helpful for people, I would be happy to talk to Elsa about reviving that. And we talked about all kinds of advocacy, legislative advocacy, school board, district advocacy, talked about, what's coming up on school board meeting agendas, just kind of anything. Sometimes I would suggest a topic that was coming up, and sometimes we would just see who showed up and what they wanted to talk about. So I guess maybe let me or Elsa know if that is something that people would be interested in attending, and I'll see if I can get that going again with Elsa.
Thanks, Liza. I'm going to hand off to Natalia.
Yeah, I just put my email in the chat, so if anybody has any other questions, I'm happy to field some questions. Yeah, and just remember that advocacy doesn't have to be complicated. It can be, but it doesn't have to be. You can just it can just be as much as like meeting with your principal or meeting with a teacher and talking about things that you're seeing and asking questions. Yeah, just like June just said, asking questions.
Thanks. And Jill?
Hi, everybody. Didn't have a lot to add, not much time. I did register for Focus Day, which again, you should do if you want to go down to Olympia. And hopefully we will have another one of these before that occurs. It is Martin Luther King Day, and I'd be happy to carpool down with anybody, and happy to talk about, brainstorm ideas for advocacy at any level that people want to engage in at any point. I do think, as we were saying, that this is we hope to make this a regular event. So I don't know if we need duplicate regular events, but let's try to streamline that so that people know where to tune in at any given time. And then hopefully next time we will also be able to answer more specific questions about what people are trying to achieve. And that way we can learn from each other in how to go about that.
So again, thank you, everyone. Stay tuned for more scheduling around when these meetings will happen in the future. Thank you. And have a great afternoon.
Thank you.